Welcome back to the iSolved University Admin Training Part C. After completing Part 2 of this training, you will be able to understand how to lock and commit time cards and understand how to preview and process your payroll. Let's pull iSolved up and get started with the process. Once you enable iSolved Time, your preview and process payroll steps change. Rather than looking at the time entry grid and then previewing and processing, we're going to go to Payroll Processing and Close Pay Period. There are 4 simple steps to locking, committing, previewing, and processing your payroll with iSolved Time turned on. Let's start with locking the time cards. In the center of the screen, you can see the Lock Time Cards button, and by selecting this, we simply lock the time cards down. Now, this padlock symbol is identical to the padlock on the time cards that we looked at in an earlier session. Once we hit the lock time cards, nobody will be able to make adjustments to the time. Locking it means that you have started the payroll process and adjustments cannot be made. Now, at any time before you process payroll, you can unlock the time cards by simply hitting the Unlock Time Cards button. So if there's an adjustment that comes in late that needs to be added in, you simply unlock, make an adjustment, come back in, and lock the time cards. Once you've locked the time cards, the next step is to commit the time cards. Now, committing the time cards takes all of the time card data and pushes it to our time entry grid. So rather than hand keying into the entry grid or importing hours, committing the time cards does it for us. Now, there are a couple of errors that we're going to see when I hit the commit time cards, and I populated these errors so you can get an idea of some troubleshooting or some errors that you might see when you process your own payrolls. So once I hit commit time cards, you'll notice that it's initiating and committing. If you have errors, they'll appear in red in between time cards and process payroll. If you don't have errors, you can move on to the next step. Now, in my scenario, like I mentioned, I have some errors populated, so let's read through them. The first one says, warning, there is unverified time for one or more employees. Please review the verification export for detailed information. So in my demo environment, I said that I wanted a notification if the time cards had not been verified. Now, just above the error, you have a time card preview results box, and like the error said, let's look at the verification export. When I choose Verification Export, I simply hit Go and a report of my verification is going to appear. This allows me to go in and see which time cards have not been signed off by the employee, manager, or supervisor. Now, it's up to you as a company to determine if you want to halt payroll if time cards are not verified, or if you simply want a warning. The warning means that you can review it, but you can still process payroll by ignoring the notification. I open the report up, and you'll notice it's giving us the employee ID, their name, who their supervisor and manager is, and then it's telling you, did the employee verify? If they did, when did they verify? Did the supervisor verify? If they did, when did they verify? And so on and so forth. So at this point, you could look through the list to see which time cards were not verified. My suggestion is to go to the time cards and double check everything if you're going to bypass the notification. Now I'm going to jump back to our close pay period process and let's focus on the next error. Warning, uncommitted time for previous pay periods have been found. If you choose to ignore this warning, all uncommitted time will be permanently saved to the database. However, any saved time outside of the current pay period will only be used for archive purposes and will not be included in the current pay run. Please run the uncommitted time report to verify records before proceeding. Records in uncommitted state may still be modified. To proceed, you must check the Ignore Warnings checkbox and recommit. So this error is letting us know that time has been added into the system and has not been committed. So an example of when this would happen is, let's say that an employee submits a time off request for last pay period. For whatever reason, it was overlooked and it wasn't approved or rejected. Well, we've closed the pay period and locked it, and now we're on to a new pay period. Well, let's say that the manager or supervisor sees that absence and goes in and approves it. Well, because that pay period has already been locked and committed and processed, it's considering that time as uncommitted time. It's appearing on the time card, but it hasn't been locked down for archive purposes. So this is just letting you know that there's information that's going to be locked for archive purposes, but it will not pay out. In this scenario, we would simply hit the ignore warnings and commit the time cards again. Now, before I do that, let's look at the last error that's on here. Commit failed. One or more employees have critical errors. Please review the alerts export for detailed information. So when we were talking about editing time cards, we talked about critical alerts, things like missing punches. Critical means that you cannot process payroll until those critical alerts are cleared. So we're going to come back up to our time card preview results. We're going to select the alerts export and go ahead and hit go, and we're going to wait for our report to run. This will give us a list of any of our employees that have outstanding alerts, and we can go in and correct those critical alerts. I'm going to open the report up. It gives us the employees' names and numbers, who their manager and supervisor are, and then as we look through this, it's going to tell us the types of errors. So on the far right-hand side, I would pay attention to the level, and it looks like Shane Adams has a critical missing punch. Heather Leopold has 2 critical missing punches. So we're going to jump to the time cards and make some corrections. So if I close out of the report and come over to our iSolve system, I'm going to go to Employee Self-Service, Time, and Time Card. And let's start with Shane Adams. I'm going to select Shane from the list. We can see on the 5th, the employee has a missing punch. Now I know because I used the group punch feature in our training that that's what this extra punch is for. So in this scenario, I'm going to click on the punch and delete it and come up here and show results. I deleted that extra punch out because it was not necessary. Now if you're looking at the time card and it's a true missing punch, you would need to enter either the in punch or the out punch to combine it. Let's jump to Heather and take a look at her now. So I'm going to use my search icon and type in Heather's last name, pull her time card up, and let's find some missing punches. So now that her time card's populated, we'll scroll over. I can see there's a missing punch on the 3rd and also on the 5th. Now for my example, I'm just going to delete these ones out, but remember, in your scenario, if they're truly missing a punch, you want to find out where the punch is missing and add it in. So I'm going to click the punch, choose my trash can, and do the same thing on Friday the 5th. Got quite a few punches on here that I'm going to take out just so we can process payroll. At this point, we're going to jump back to our close pay period process. So we'll go back to payroll processing and close pay period. Now, we've already locked the time cards, so at this point, we're going to hit the commit time cards. We'll probably still get the verification and the uncommitted time warning, but we should no longer see the critical alerts warning listed. So you'll notice we have our unverified time and also our uncommitted time listed. So because we know what these errors are here for, I'm going to select ignore warnings, and you'll notice up at the top it says checking the ignore warnings will allow the time cards to be committed when there are warnings. So it's just making sure that you truly want to ignore the warnings posted. At this point, we hit commit time cards one last time, so we ignore them and we commit, and it's going to grab all of the time card data and push it to our time entry grid. Up at the top, we can see that the time cards have been committed successfully, and now our payroll process is similar to what you would be doing before iSolve Time. You can preview the payroll and then process the payroll. Now before we go through the preview and process, I want to mention that once you commit the time, all hours have been added to the time entry grid. So if you wanted to make individual adjustments or you needed to make adjustments to deductions or taxes or anything to that matter, on the left-hand side we could go to payroll entry and our time entry grid. Now our grid will be filled out with all of our payroll data, and you could individually go to your employees and make adjustments. So if I went to the individual time entry, it's pulling up Shane Adams. At this point, we could come in and make adjustments. I'm going to choose all. We could come in and make adjustments to any information we needed. Maybe we needed to block some taxes or block some deductions, add additional deductions. Anything you needed to do for an individual employee at this point could be done on the time entry grid. Now, once you make changes, in order to process payroll, we have to go back into payroll processing and close pay period. So now that we've made any adjustments, locked and committed our time cards, we're going to hit the Preview Payroll button. The Preview Payroll is going to generate that list of Preview Payroll reports for you to go in and review. So it tells us the preview was generated successfully, and you'll notice our preview results are here on the right-hand side. So we have our payroll summary, our payroll register, alerts, check register. So we suggest going through all of these reports, especially the summary, the register, and the change audit, to make sure that your payroll looks correct. So do the audit of your payroll. Once you've ran these reports, you simply hit Process Payroll. We get an Are you sure you want to process this payroll? It'll tell you how many new hires have been added, any new direct deposit accounts or direct deposit changes. So it's just referencing some information in the system for you to say, yes, I'm sure I want to do this. Once you've reviewed the information, you simply hit Process Payroll. You'll notice down here it says our payroll is in process. And once it's complete, at the top of the screen, we'll get our payroll complete. Payroll run number 54 has been processed. Reports will be available shortly. So at this point, we've fully processed our payroll. And remember, if you want to see reports on this specific payroll run, we go to Reporting and Report Archive. So all payroll reports, once payroll has been ran, will be under the Report Archives. So you can see our Run 54. And at this point, we can see our summary, our register, our change audit, and new employee reports. So you could come back in at any time to review them.